What's up everyone, the Game2K2 here once again, and today I continue my review of the Harry Potter franchise with the video game adaptation of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Now to be fair, despite how bad video game adaptations tend to be for movies or books, the adaptations for the Sorcerer's Stone and the Chamber of Secrets weren't that bad. Don't get me wrong, they were still extremely flawed, but they were entertaining enough to keep your interest for the entire game. Now, we move on to the Prisoner of Azkaban. The PC and the console versions of this game are both action-adventure games, but despite a few similarities, they are actually two very different games. So I'll start with the PC version first. For the most part, the game does a very good job on following the story of the movie, but also does a good job on adding a couple elements from the books as well, which is something I really like about all of the games because the movies do skip a few parts. Most of the gameplay elements that were in the previous games are still in this game as well, granted with a few modifications. The game still allows a great deal of free roam around Hogwarts, but my problem with this version of the free roam is that it's a bit dull. If there's one thing that bugs me about the free roam is that there really isn't much of anything to do, and the fact that there aren't any students roaming around the halls makes the roaming even more boring. One thing that I've noticed from a lot of free-roaming games is that you have to create side missions, or else it's not going to work. And that really is the story with the Prisoner of Azkaban, because collecting cards and flavored beans can only go so far. With that being said, there still is one side mission that's really worth mentioning, and that's the Hippogriff Flying, which you can do to collect cards. The Hippogriff Flying is actually a course that you can actually go to at your own leisure. There are 5 courses and you have to fly through rings to gain points. Each course you have to get a certain number of points, and naturally the point totals get higher and higher with each course. To be fair, this is actually a pretty good concept, but it's unbelievably glitchy. They put obstacles in front of you as the courses get harder, but the problem with this is actually getting beyond the obstacles. You'll hit trees and you'll actually be stuck behind the trees. Also, there are some obstacles where you'll actually seem like you're flying right by it, but you'll still hit the damn thing. There are also points where the mode might actually get so glitchy that you'll fly right through the trees. I've also noticed that there is one glitch with the rings. Sometimes even if you go through one, it might not record it. However, I'm not sure whether that was deliberate or not from the developers. I'm also really disappointed with the spell system in this game. After the first 2 games kind of experimented with it, I was really expecting something different and more detailed from the Prisoner of Azkaban. This seems to be an ongoing problem with this franchise, and that's its really lackluster spell system. And the Prisoner of Azkaban is no different because there really isn't much to it. For the PC version, the game already has a default set of spells, and you don't choose them, and that's my problem with this. The game already knows what spells to use when and where, and that bugs me. They should not only have all of the spells, but they should already have a control scheme so that you can use each spells at different times. Instead, they turned a spell system into a really one-dimensional feature, which is odd since spellcasting is such a huge part of the books and the movies. However, one credit I will give the game is that some of the missions are actually a bit challenging, mainly due to the aim system in the game. The natural thought would be that the aim system would be as automatic as the spell system, but it really isn't. With some missions, because you're getting fired at, you have to keep moving and then cast a spell, which makes aiming much more harder, and I love that challenge in this game. Also, the PC version has a number of lessons that Harry, Ron, and Hermione take. Each lesson has their own set of challenges. Some have different mazes and puzzles. For instance, Hermione's final exam has you going through a rather interesting puzzle where you get to go through passageways as a rabbit and a dragon, which is actually quite interesting. This is actually something that the previous 2 games had too, but they're much bigger and a little more elaborate. Some, I think, are a little too big, like Ron's first puzzle in Defense Against the Dark Arts took what seemed like an eternity to get through. Well, 15 minutes to be exact, but for the first puzzle at Hogwarts, that's quite long. From a graphical standpoint, this is where I'm most angry with this game. Games for the PC were becoming incredibly enhanced in graphics, like Max Payne 1 and 2, Halo was now out for the PC, and then there was the Prisoner of Azkaban, which actually doesn't look like much of an enhancement over the first 2 games. The character models are okay, but the glitches come in unbelievable numbers. The cutscenes aren't well animated, and the sound actually jumps up and down on a few occasions. Now, to the game's credit, Hogwarts does look amazing. In fact, I wouldn't doubt if all the efforts from the developers actually went into the school, because the school looks incredibly detailed. I think what really bugs me about the graphics is that they had 2 years to develop this game, so my expectations on the graphics were pretty high. So seeing that the game didn't look much different kind of ruined it. Overall, I like the puzzles and I like the classes in the game, but there is way too much to be desired with the PC version. So many elements have so much potential, but get cut short, and that's really sad. Now on to the console versions. While the way it tells its story is similar, most of the elements and missions of the game have been changed. For one, there is less focus on classes and a little more focus on the puzzles and missions around Hogwarts, which I have to admit is a lot more interesting. I think what's really interesting is that a couple of the missions feel a bit like something out of Tomb Raider for some reason, but that's just my opinion about them. I'm also a lot more impressed with the free roam that's on the consoles rather than the PC, because not only are there actual students walking through the halls on some occasions, but you can actually communicate with them as well. It's usually only about one sentence, but at least it's something. Also, with more puzzles that aren't just in classrooms, the free roam is much more interesting and much more fun. Also, on a little side note, flying Buckbeak is much more fun in this version because you can fly him anywhere around the school, which is amazing. Then there's the spell system, which despite some modifications is still a train wreck. Unlike the PC version, the game has an inventory list that you can access with the select button. Here you can see what kind of things you've collected, you can upgrade your skills, and set up spells for your wand. There are spells that Harry, Ron, and Hermione can do. While there are a few spells that all three can do, each character has a few spells that they can do only individually. While I don't mind this concept, I hate setting up the spells. There actually is a good number of spells, however you can only equip 2 spells to your wand. So that means every time you need a different spell, you have to go back to inventory and change the spells, which is a complete waste of time. However, aiming the spells is much easier in this game. The game has a targeting system that really makes the missions far more easier, especially if it's one that involves a lot of spells. To me, that's the biggest problem with this version of the game. It's far too easy. While the PC version does offer some challenge, the console version doesn't. Everything sort of flies by in this game, and that's the major issue with this version of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. From a control standpoint, navigating is pretty simple. However, the spellcasting is a little delayed. The spellcasting does require a little bit of patience to get used to, because it's not like firing a gun in action games, so tapping the button repeatedly might only result in about 3 to 4 spells. From a graphical standpoint, I can honestly say that The Prisoner of Azkaban is a very good-looking game. The character models match the actors perfectly, and the lighting in this game is amazing. This is one of those games where it's really hard to distinguish one version from the other when it comes to the PS2, Xbox, and GameCube versions. But after taking a close look, I'll say that the Xbox version wins this round. The Xbox is better overall in sound, the lighting is a bit more detailed, and the character models look slightly better. However, these differences are slight, and I do mean slight. Even looking at each version side by side, you won't be able to tell the difference right away. The PS2 version has some occasional graphical glitches, and the loading times for the PS2 can get a bit aggravating at times. The GameCube version is pretty much almost like the Xbox and PS2 from the naked eye, but there are some minor graphical features with the environments that are missing in some areas, but that's a small difference. Overall, the console version is pretty good. However, I do think that the control scheme and the difficulty really should have been adjusted, because those 2 elements really stick out. Well, everyone, that's it for now. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.